I'd like to share a little bit about spiritualism, and this comes from J. Stilson Judah's The History and Philosophy of the Metaphysical Movements in America. This was published in 1967. And he's talking about the different revelations that came with spiritualism, particularly in the late 19th century when automatic writing was beginning. We may have talked earlier about the different forms of communication with spirit, with those in life's other rooms. And with this automatic writing that was coming through a lot of people, a lot of the information was different from what Andrew Jackson Davis was telling us. A lot of the writers, some of them you may be familiar with. I know Rachel's class, Paul Selig, he would fall in right along with Helen Blavatsky, who developed theosophy, and Alice Bailey, who claimed to have been guided by a Tibetan master soul. If you haven't read any of her material, it's very, very deep, I should say. It's wonderful material. But what came to the forefront with Mr. Judah's writing was a Dr. John Newbraw, who became disgusted with he felt that some of the ideas that was coming through were a bit ridiculous. So what he did was he purified himself. He didn't mention the steps that he took to do that, but he did this for 10 years. And it was after this process that he became moved or impressed to purchase a typewriter. And in 1881, he found that if he sat down before the machine, of course, for us, that would be a keyboard, but some mysterious entity he felt took control of his hands. And the book that he published is known as OASPE. The spelling for this is OHASPE, OASPE, a new Bible. This writing is I've read some of it. It's different. It falls in line with books like the Aquarian Gospel and others that are similar to that. It was a new revelation is how he was presenting this. And some people found it fascinating, some people didn't. A religious group formed around it. They were called the Faithists. When I did some recent research for the ISA on one of their educational materials, I checked to see if there were any of those organizations still in existence, and I was unable to find any. So I don't know if the organization has become defunct or they're just a small pockets of them, like the Swedenborgian churches that were prevalent in the 60s and 70s. So are there any questions or comments? Yes.
So you had said that is it OHASPE book? A new Bible?
It works for me.
Was like the Aquarian Gospel. What are the similarities there? What's the, I guess, summary?
The OASPE gives a different history of mankind, a different history of their development. Some of it is similar to some of the Gnostic writings with the creation of man, having difficulty moving, is growth. I'm trying to think. It's been it seems like 20 years since I read the book. But he talks about some of the, well, here's something that I do recall very definitely. He talks about the different realities and how when we transition from this room, we move into another room that's very similar to what we're familiar with. And we continue our progression in that fashion. And each time, the way I understood it is as we move through these different rooms, we go through the same dying process or the process of transition as death has become known to be. And we move from these different rooms closer to what we have called the source or God or infinite intelligence. We move closer to that source of unification, of unity. And with that, he talks about how some of the people who have become addicted to pleasures of the flesh, is how he puts it. And this is people who like to drink, who like to smoke, who get caught up in other abuses of chemicals and such. He talks about them hanging out in these environments where these practices are popular. For instance, those people who like to drink and smoke, well, their spirit entities, they would congregate in the bars and such. So it could explain why when we step into one of these buildings, one of these atmospheres, they feel so oppressive, because he's proposing that there's more than just people there. There are these others who have transitioned from this room who are still trying to have that experience.
Yeah, so they're kind of feeding off of that psychic energy from the people who are experiencing those things.
Precisely.
Mhm.
I think the term that was developed was attachments. And then later they came up with the walk-ins and such.
I haven't heard the term walk-in.
Hmm. Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
Are you talking about walk-ins as far as spiritual?
Yes. The way it was presented, and this is not part of OWASP that I am aware of. OWASP it's a very thick book. And I only read maybe a little bit like that. So, but when I first heard about the walk-ins, they talked about them as spirit entities that would step into our body when in those occasions where we drank too much and passed out, or where we lost control of our reason, I guess would be a good way to explain that. That's the way it was explained to me. Myself, I'm not too sure about that anymore. From what I've learned through different teachings, it may be more along the lines of different aspects of ourselves that step in, whether it's from a conscious perspective or a karmic perspective with reincarnation. There's a lot of different ways to apply that. So it a lot of it depends on the individual.
So the walk-in could also be walking into automatic writing
Right.
and take over
That's
the pen.
I didn't even think of that. Thank you. Yes, that would be a good example in that aspect. They never they always talk about these negative aspects and they blow them out of proportion. And sometimes it really takes a lot of effort to connect that to something that's more beneficial. So thank you for that.
I do automatic writing.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
I figure it as a gift from God. So
Right, right. First Corinthians, what is that? Chapter 12, verses 7 through 11, talks about the spiritual gifts and how they are all from one spirit, one God, one source. So, yes, you're very correct with that. Thank you.
well,
Yeah. I've always viewed automatic writing as a connection with our higher self rather than a different entity. The some of the studies that I've done years ago talked about those that drink to excess and to the point of passing out or having a blackout can be reanimated by those spirits that you talked about, and it may account for what science hasn't accounted for, where someone ends up in jail for doing whatever, and they have a blood alcohol level that the doctors scratch their head, and there's no way someone can be conscious, yet they were conscious and animated. And this may be a way of explaining that from the it's sort of like stealing a car is kind of the way that I viewed it. These spirits have been trying to have that experience the way you nicely explained. And that's a way of directly having that experience. And so now that they got the wheels, they will use that vehicle to try to have all the experiences that they can. Not a good idea to drink to excess and pass out. It's the barriers, the natural barriers come down. What I was going to say about walk-ins, during my time living in Florida, we had a friend that believed he was a walk-in, and what that meant was that at some point, his spirit was ready to leave, wanted to depart this experience, and that it was an agreement on a soul level to have an exchange, to allow the one soul to move on, and this other soul that was wanting to and have a body in order to pursue some higher experiences. And what he described was after that period of time, I think it happened, that transition happened while he was in a hospital. But after that, his close family were like strangers to him. He knew them, he knew all their history, he had all of his memories, but he didn't have the emotional connection anymore, the things that would connect you to your children and all of that. So I can't state that as that's absolute fact, but that was one experience that I had with knowing someone, and that's the way they explained and believed their own experience to be.
That's a very good description there. Some of that I can confirm, but I won't go into that now. So, are there any other comments or questions?
Well, just along the lines of what Reverend Thomas was talking about in a previous discussion we had, for some of you that weren't there, we talked about how one theory of the soul is that you've got a higher self and you have concurrent realities. Some people believe that there aren't past lives and future lives, that time is more like an onion where there's concurrent realities and lives happening. And so your soul kind of gets split into, or your soul energy gets split into these different bodies and personalities who are all living concurrent realities. And so one theory would be that maybe if you did have a switch out, like Reverend Thomas talked about, it might be one of your other aspects, coming in. But
Yes, that was a discussion we got into briefly during one of Rachel's book club meetings. So
Sounds like a
There's a-
good one.
there's a lot going on there. So,
I was just going to mention that this discussion, especially what Reverend Thomas was talking about, I believe Ruth Montgomery goes into this quite extensively in the book. I think it's Strangers Among Us, something like that. Strangers something. I can't remember. I've got it upstairs. I can't remember, but it does go into that a lot. And a lot of that was exactly what Reverend Thomas was describing, that the family of this man probably noticed the difference in him, that he wasn't the man you were describing, that he wasn't the same as he used to be. And they said that happens a lot when someone walks in. They appear to be the same, but they're not the same. That's all. It was really interesting.
exactly. The differences are very subtle, and only someone who's very observant would pick up on that. For instance, some of their memories may not be quite right, or the particular memory is gone when it shouldn't be. So, yeah, and the idea of different versions of yourself slipping in and slipping out, it makes a lot of sense because of the frequency. I would imagine it would be difficult for someone who's vibrating at a different frequency to slip into a form that is vibrating at a frequency that is so different from it. So any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to say there's a couple of movies out there that aren't exactly the concepts that we were talking about, but like one movie is called Every Day.
Yes.
And I first saw it on Amazon Prime. It was free at the time, and I tried to show it to Aaron this last Friday, but now there's only an option to buy. But anyway, this movie Every Day is about a soul who, of no doing of their own, for some reason, every day that they wake up in someone else's life. They kind of hop bodies or lives, and they don't necessarily want to. They want congruency. But anyway, this soul ends up hopping into like high school kids, and it's actually more innocently done than it sounds like. I mean, I suppose it might sound kind of freaky, but so anyway, it's a sweet soul, and it hangs out with this one girl, and it tries to tell her every day. It goes to her high school, and every day it's like, I'm not really John, now I'm Susie. It's the same, I'm the same person or whatever. So anyway, it was kind of cutely done, and it sort of, I thought it kind of spoke to the fundamentals of our consciousness, and our experience, because our bodies can change, our faces can change, we can age, but we're still this consciousness, having this life experience, and how people might treat us different depending on how we look, or our age, or our skin color, or our race or whatnot. But anyway, So some of that was brought into the movie, and it was interesting, thought-provoking.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
That was like a wonderful update to Quantum Leap.
Oh, right. I loved that show.
So thank you. Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you for allowing me to share that.